Welcome, everyone, to the Two Real Cinema Club. My name is Andres Lorente.
And I am James Rosica. And every episode on the Two Real Cinema Club, we watch two movies, an old movie and a new movie. We try and connect the dots. I was trying to think of a good image for that. There used to be a famous advert for lavatory paper. What do you call it in America? Bathroom tissue? What's the name of it? What's the polite word for it?
I've heard bathroom tissue, but that's the polite word. We say toilet paper.
Toilet paper, okay, that's what we call it. So there was a famous advert, like in the 1980s, for toilet paper, where they would get a puppy and they would tie like a roll of toilet paper around its tummy and then get it to run all around the house. And imagine a puppy doing that, only you've tied a bit of string around it and it's running around an old blockbuster video.
Yes,
making connections between different DVDs as they fall off the shelf. That's what our podcast is in a nutshell.
I'd never thought of it that way, but now I can't get that image out of my mind.
Yeah, there's probably a reason why you've never thought of it that way.
I don't think we had that advert in the States, but it's effective. Yeah, we're going to unreel. We're going to unspool the toilet paper for you, folks. That's what this podcast is about.
Release the puppy.
And if you haven't heard of us yet, or your friends haven't heard of us, make sure that you spread the word that the Two Real Cinema Club is on Twitter at Two Real Cinema Club at twitter.com. We're on Instagram at Two Real Cinema Club at Instagram.com. You can read the blog at tworealcinemaclub.com. You can email us at tworealcinemaclub at gmail.com. Tell everyone you know that you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts, and on YouTube.
And on the YouTube.
Yeah, you can probably get that advertisement about the puppy running around with the toilet unspooling on YouTube, too. That's what I love about YouTube. I love looking at the old commercials on YouTube. That is a pastime of mine. Very nostalgic. So today on the show, we're doing a deep dive with James Cameron. We're looking at his new film, Avatar: The Way of Water. And comparing that to 1989's The Abyss. I like to call this the James Cameron The Abysmal Avatar Show.
Oh! That feels like you're giving away the punchline too early.
Sorry.
Well, let's start with the new Avatar film. So, which as of today, I looked it up, currently box office gross is $1.708 billion.
So that's close to $2 billion. Is that what you're saying? $2 billion?
That's close to, yeah, it's difficult to see it not crossing $2 billion at this point.
God.
Yeah, absolutely.
Was that pounds or dollars? That's dollars.
That's dollars.
Okay.
That's the international currency of cinema.
Okay.
It's dollars.
Wow.
And the way I had to write down in my notebook like a little summary of if I was advertising the movie, and the little summary in my mind was that it's the film with more very thin, almost naked teenagers than you'll see at the Paris fashion show. So we're going to change the format very slightly. We're going to have a quick synopsis of the movie, and then we will talk about it afterwards. So let me tell you the synopsis. So we are back to Pandora, which is the alien planet from the original Avatar movie from 2009. It's been about 15 years or so after the humans were seen off at the end of the first movie. And so we have alien Navi retro conversion human hybrid Jake Sully, played by Sam Worthington, and his wife Natiri, played by Zoe Saldana. Is it Saldana or Saldana? How should I pronounce that? I have a question.
I think it's Saldana.
Saldana, because I think she has the curly thing over the N. I should know what that's called.
That's called a tilde, and if she does, then she's Saldana. Yeah, Saldana.
Okay, well, maybe I'm getting it wrong. I don't know. Okay, I'm going to go with Saldana because that's what you told me. So the two of them, they have a family now. They have 3 children of their own, and they also have another girl, Kiri, who is immaculately conceived by Sigourney Weaver's character at the end of the last movie, and they also kind of adopted Spider, who is a human teenager. So they kind of have these 5 kids in a kind of knockabout family. But after these 15 years, the human forces return. They burn their way back onto the planet. They turn the forest into lava, and this time they're back playing a different game. Jake's old nemesis, Colonel Quaritch, from the first movie, who was killed at the end of the first movie, spoilers, has been reincarnated using his old uploaded memories, stuck into a new avatar body, and he wants revenge. So he captures Jake and Terry's children, and although the kids escape, it's clear the family must go on the run, so they flee to a reef off the coast in a kind of how I spent my summer vacation sort of scenario. So they spend some time at the beach. The adults learn how to fish and ride sea creatures. The teenagers fight and fall in love, and they befriend an outcast space whale called Piranha. Meanwhile, the humans who've come back to the planet are harvesting the whales, Moby Dick style, and Quaritch, the bad guy, commandeers a whaling vessel to search the reef for Jake and the family with the reluctant help of Spider, who is the human teenager. Eventually, the family is found, and the fight is on.
Oh, yeah. I would say fights, wouldn't you? It's more than one.
The fights, many fights. One long extended fight. Exactly. Well, I mean, it's there's three very clear acts in this movie, isn't there? So we start out with the normal world. We have the kidnap of the children as the kind of inciting incident, the start of the adventure. Then they go off to the reef for like a really long second act. And they have tests and allies and enemies, but really this really long. I was trying to explain it to a friend. It's like a 90-minute training montage.
Yeah.
And then finally it all comes together for the final hour. We have a third act with like a final confrontation. It's a really kind of straightforward hero's journey shaped movie. And for the amount of story that it tells, it's long, I think. Yep. It's too long to justify this length, because the movie is 3 hours and 10 minutes, 3 hours and 20 minutes, something like that.
Yeah.
It's long. The standard joke, which I've told many people, is the reason that it's called The Way of Water is because the only thing you'll be able to think about for about the second and third hours of the film is passing water. Did your bladder survive the film?
I did, surprisingly. Yeah, I've been
nothing wrong with your prostate.
I underestimate my bladder. I always think I'm going to have to go, and then I don't have to. So what I thought of immediately was I'm going to call these Cameron films intentionally epic. He's just dying to make epic films. And the epic films of the Golden Age had an intermission, right? You'd go in, there was actually a prelude, sort of there's a piece of music that started before the credits even came on. Hour and a half in or so, you'd have an intermission. People would go out, pass water, buy treats at the popcorn counter or whatnot. And then you get the next part of the film. And you don't have that anymore, which is very funny to me, that if you're going to make a film that long, you must expect people to leave at some point. So it's kind of this admission that it doesn't matter if you miss 5 or 10 minutes on his epics, because you're not going to miss anything, and you don't. And he's in these two films, I just noticed so many detours, and I'm glad you mentioned the water training montage, because that takes a long time, and it gives us some important information. We realize that the kids are going to have to learn how to breathe underwater, and there are going to be some lifestyle changes, but it's long, and it's a detour, and he has a lot of them in these films.
I'm surprised that seeing as cinema is largely a mechanism for selling popcorn, I'm surprised that the exhibitors haven't put their foot down and said, there must be an intermission because we could sell more pop and popcorn.
Yeah.
When I had to go to the loo about halfway through, we went to see this film at the BFI IMAX in Waterloo, which is at 9 o'clock in the morning, which is such a great time to see a film. Cinema was pretty much packed.
Wow.
And we had seats right down at the front, so I had to walk up to the back to go to the loo, and I walked past every row. And even though I thought I had chosen a boring part of the movie to go and quickly pop out to the loo, as I walked up those stairs and past every row, every other person in the film was absolutely captivated.
Oh.
There was no one glancing at their phone or chatting to their neighbour or rummaging for chocolates in their bag. Absolutely everyone was completely in the moment. Audiences love this movie. I think there is a reason why it's taken $1.7 billion already. People are really enjoying it.
Yeah, I sort of get that. It's not my kind of film, so I won't be too judgmental if possible, although I will be later, I think.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. I mean, the technology going into it and the accomplishment of just making this film is incredible. And it does look really interesting. I find it disturbing looking in so many ways, and I love your description of the Parisian fashion walk or the fashion show runway, because everyone's really thin. This is not a film for Americans.
Very thin, uncomfortably thin. Yeah,
it almost makes me feel like we're going to start seeing a lot of these stretching surgeries where people are made 8 and 10 feet tall, so all that body fat just stretches out and makes us look better than we really are. But it's wondrous, I guess, right? I mean, you're seeing these new worlds, and they're very well appointed, and it's all very lush. I don't think there's a whole lot of story there. So I'm going to guess that a lot of those people, even though you caught them in a good moment when they were all cheery and paying attention, I think there's a lot of boredom in this film because it's just 3 hours. And I think the current human attention span really can't take 3 hours of this or anything for that matter. So I still think it's a massive mistake to not focus on making a lean story that really holds people's attention for an hour and 45. I think you could do this in less than 2 hours, but 3 hours and 15 minutes or whatever it was is excessive.
It's interesting that not only is it an extremely long film, but it also somehow manages to encompass every other film from James Cameron. Oh, that's a mistake I'm going to make a lot. Not David Cameron. This film was not made by the broadly unpopular Conservative Prime Minister from the UK, David Cameron. It was made by James Cameron, somebody completely different, and not even the brother of David Cameron. It feels like it contains like a little précis of all of James Cameron's previous movies. I started making a list because like early in the film you have the bridge explosion from True Lies, you have the exoskeletons from Aliens.
Yeah,
this notion of Quaritch having his kind of consciousness transferred into this sort of new avatar robotic body feels like a plot point from Terminator movies.
Yep.
We have this idea of dragging unconscious people underwater from the abyss. We have an enormous ship that rolls all the way over 180 degrees from Titanic. Basically, it contains a little bit of every other James Cameron film, all kind of squished into one mega feature. It's a little bit like. When I was a boy, we used to have these books called I Spy books, where it would be like the I Spy book of garden birds, and you'd have to tick off whenever you saw one. There should be an I Spy book of James Cameron in this movie.
I'm glad you mentioned that for a couple of reasons. Number one, I would like to see a David Cameron film next before seeing another James Cameron film. But there's this theory of there are only, 7 to 12 great plots and great stories, and they're just we retell them. And countless authors over the centuries have done the same thing. I think for James Cameron, he's really proving that idea true, is that this man has maybe 1 or 2 stories, and you're absolutely right that he cannibalizes his own previous work to create new things. There's nothing new in this. We're probably going to have a big call to the cliche squad at some point because this is just cliche upon
already amassing
cliche upon cliche. So I agree with you entirely, and you are obviously far more familiar with his work than I am. But yeah, I saw all of those things in there, and it just makes me feel like, even watching The Abyss, there's not a tremendous amount of a difference between those two films. Not enough, anyway.
I did come away asking myself, this is such a cliche screenwritery question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I asked myself, whose story is this? Because I came away kind of thinking, well, it's probably supposed to be Jake Sully's character. He's like the main character. He's like, the guy on the poster. He's the center of the story. But really, he seems to spend most of the movie as a kind of secondary dad in the background kind of character. Interestingly, he's not even deeply moved by the death of a major character towards the end of the film. And I feel like the main driver of the story, the people who own the story, are the kids. But then which one? Is there one kid who owns the story? It's like this kind of, it's like a gang like the Famous Five go to Pandora. It's like a block of teenagers having a kind of teenager adventure when they go away for the summer and they meet new people and learn new skills. I feel like, well, if that really is going to be their story, could do with a little bit more focus and impetus rather than being a bit of a kind of collage of teenage experiences.
I agree. I'm going to say I think it's the son Loak's story more than anyone else because he seems to be in all the scenes or many of the scenes anyway, and he's someone who has like troubles or problems to address from the first act, from the very beginning all the way to the end, and he has these guilt issues and also these. I guess he's the rebellious son compared to his older brother. So I felt it was more his story, but honestly, I thought that is the name Quaritch? Quaritch. His character seemed to be the real driving force in terms of the theme. There was a lot of sort of male toxicity in this film and poor fathering and just terrible decisions and American military several times just coming down and wiping out, pillaging and just setting fire to places or bulldozing entire forests and things like that. So I felt like it was kind of his. I think it was a revenge story. As far as I could tell, he was just upset that But he'd been killed in the airplane crash in Pandora, and I don't remember the original film very well because it's been 12 years. I'm not going to watch it again. Honestly,
I think he is killed by an arrow by Materi.
Materi, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so there's this big fight, isn't there? And he's in this kind of big exoskeleton suit.
Yeah, I mean,
he kills him with an arrow.
I really think that this is just a revenge film. Ultimately, it was this sort of revenge story, but he couldn't exact entire revenge because his own son, or what he could perceive as his son, was sort of in the way. So there's this development of some sort of sentimentality or feeling or emotion for a possible relative. And then the other thing that really bugs me is that, you've gone up the line trying to take out one antagonist and then the next, and you're trying to get all the way up to Quaritch and then Spider. Maybe I shouldn't reveal that.
Yeah, no, yeah. No, I think it's all right. We're in spoiler territory now. Yeah.
Spider has a chance to really just let Quaritch go and become part of the universe, let's say. But Quaritch escapes, and you assume he's going to become an antagonist in yet another Avatar film where he could have been dispensed with easily in this film. So then what? The next one's also going to be about revenge? It's kind of weak storytelling considering you've spent 12 years or more on this film, and you've had plenty of chances to write something good. And I think we'll have to talk about what Cameron's real intentions are here. But I think this film feels like a commodity. It's a follow up on a previous film, and it's just setting up another film. So I think it's a successful commodity at $1.7 billion already.
Yeah.
But in terms of storytelling, I think here we are. We're both struggling with it. I mean, there are themes of fatherhood in there. There are themes of environmentalism, sort of. You're right. Between us, we've put out at least 3 possibilities of male characters who are the owners of the story. Though Kiri could also be one, and she's an odd character because she's Sigourney Weaver, but she's not Sigourney Weaver. And
yes.
At one point, she's hovering in this tank, sort of pregnant looking, and then all of a sudden Sigourney Weaver's hugging Kiri later on, and then I was shocked to find out, that's Sigourney Weaver's voice the whole time of that character. So and she's a main character in some ways too. So it is disturbing that we can't, between the two of us, really name the person whose story it is.
I mean, you are right that the film spends so much energy setting up the next episode, a little bit like it's almost like episode 2 of a TV series. That by the end of the movie, we are in largely the same place that we were at the start of the movie. Mm-hmm. Maybe we've lost 1 or 2 characters, and some people have learned how to swim. But otherwise, we're kind of largely in the same place with the same people.
Yeah.
Not very much was resolved. You don't really feel like anybody has learned anything. It's interesting what you were talking about, the themes of fatherhood, because it's a very peculiar kind of fatherhood in this film. Mm-hmm. It strikes me as it's like a sort of 1960s fatherhood. In the UK, it seems very unusual when you see children call their father sir. Is that something that still happens in the US, or is that something which only happens in 1960s movies and not the real world?
Yeah, it's definitely dated. Among military families, it might be a bit more common, but it's dated.
My tradition is to somehow turn the Two Real Cinema Club into the Two Real Book Club. I did read a book again for this week's pod. So I read The Futurist by Rebecca Keegan, which is a fairly hagiographic biography of James Cameron. But I thought I'd read that just to find out a little bit about his upbringing, to see whether the upbringing that we see for the boys, for Nettiam and Loak in the film, is similar to his upbringing, his life with his brother when he was a boy. So he James Cameron grew up in suburban Canada, really near Niagara Falls. And his mother was in the Canadian Women's Army Corps. And his brother tells this little story at the beginning of the book, The Futurist. He says that their father would tell him, "If you mess up, I'll take you to the woodshed." Yeah, and he was pretty sure we didn't even have a woodshed, but somehow this threat was enough to frighten them into the straight and narrow. And so I think what we're seeing here is James Cameron's own boyhood, but not really a very identifiable or understandable parenting portrayal for most of the rest of the audience. I think anybody who's under 50 years old will find it difficult to recognize this kind of parenting, which means the whole movie kind of, I agree, it feels dated, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think it does take us back to your original pointing to Jake Sully, as the character who's supposed to carry this film, because he says, I think it's right around the midpoint of the film, I just want to keep my family safe. That's what a father does. You get these voiceovers once in a while from him sort of telling his story. And it sort of, the film begins with him doing a voiceover where he sort of discusses how all the children were born and sort of catches you up to date on what's been going on in 15 years or so. And that includes taking a family to a new world and sort of almost becoming immigrants to this new place, this new part of Pandora, and reestablishing a family in a new environment. So it is kind of about fatherhood and Sully, and that is kind of the central of the film, but it gets lost. A lot of stuff gets lost in this film, I think.
I'm not convinced that he is a particularly great father as well.
He admonishes the boys, especially at certain times, and he doesn't necessarily, give a great example of fatherhood or what the traditional man that he's looking for them to be actually is.
And I don't feel like he's learned, any lessons about fathering during the film either. It's not like he gets to the end of the film and realizes, oh, I should have done that.
Yeah.
Oh, now I've learned my lesson. He's kind of, his look to camera at the end of the movie is, oh, now we're going to get revenge because Quaritch is going to come back and I can swim now.
Yes, it's all going to happen all over again.
Yes, exactly. I thought it was interesting what you were saying earlier on about how vividly imagined the film, the story world is.
Yeah.
And it is very vivid. I find it kind of distractingly sort of bright, actually. It's like, I feel like the whole movie is largely overlit, which is one way I think it compares unfavorably to The Abyss. I'm sure we'll talk about that later on. But everything seems kind of incredibly bright in Technicolor.
Yeah.
And I kind of came away thinking, well, perhaps there wasn't quite enough strangeness in the film. Like, I feel like the sea creatures that we see in this film are just slightly different versions of Earth sea creatures. Yeah. Just like the forest creatures are just slight variations on Earth forest creatures. I think you could watch a BBC documentary and see stranger, weirder, more bizarre sea creatures than you would in this movie, and those creatures are real. I feel like it's a little bit of a missed trick. We have these space whales, but they seem an awful lot like normal whales, but with slightly more fins or something. And it's the same with the humanoid characters as well. So Jake and Neytiri and the family, they go and live with these Navi people who live in an archipelago, and these people, well, they have kind of face tattoos, a lot like traditional Polynesian people might have. It reminded me a little bit, there was an old Rowan Atkinson sketch on TV many years ago where he plays an alien from a completely different planet, and he takes over the television program, and he says, oh, this is a broadcast. My name is Thrag from the planet Zod or whatever. He says, my world is very different to yours. He says, we have no death, we have no gravity, and we have a different shaped gear stick on the mini metro. And and that's kind of a little bit like what this feels like. It's like we've gone to somewhere very, very far from Earth, and everything is completely different. But also, they also have whales, but they have an extra fin, and another eye or something. Yeah. I mean, it feels. I'm a little bit disappointed at the sheer weirdness of it.
Yeah, I agree with you entirely, and I think he's lost sort of in between too much creativity and too little creativity. I think you're right. There's not that much variation from what we have on Earth. I think he is trying to do some sort of environmentalist parable, but using a different planet. But then, he can have anything. James Cameron gives him he gives himself the leeway to do anything. He's got creatures that fly, then swim. He's got creatures that swim, then fly. He's got creatures that swim and creatures that fly. He just keeps inventing all these things that you think he's going to use in some interesting way, but he doesn't really do anything that interesting. So I think he's just sort of lost within his own imagination and with his own creativity and its excesses as well as its deficits. And it makes for a strange ride for sure. But I think a bit of restraint, just kind of zeroing in on that story. I don't think he's that kind of filmmaker, so I don't think he'll ever do that. But I think that would help in terms of the story. And after watching both films, I felt like this is a guy who directs action, but he doesn't direct actors. I mean, I felt like there's just his action stuff it's commendable, especially in The Abyss. His use of like following in narrow and enclosed spaces, a lot of camera work and camera movement. It's fantastic. But in terms of actually telling or guiding actors in how to make his wooden dialogue ring or how to really get their characters rounded out, I don't think he does that. I don't think that's who he is as a person or as a filmmaker.
Maybe that's not what audiences want to see.
Probably not, but I think it would get this whatever story he's trying to tell. I think it would come with a leaner storytelling and more believable dialogue and more believable characters and actors. For me, one of the most metaphorical moments was I loved it when they're extracting this sort of life extension chemical from the brains of, I guess I'll call them whales. They look just like whales to me.
Yeah.
And sort of wasting the rest of the animal. And I just figured, okay, this is like the extension of the Avatar series. You can extend this into the future interminably, ad nauseum, forever. They're just going to keep using this life extension chemical to make more of these Avatar films. And it's also bizarre because it comes from Jermaine Clement is used. He's an actor who was in Flight of the Conchords and a film that I saw recently. He's a very comic, wonderful New Zealand Kiwi actor. But it's a serious role. He looks kind of older and bloated, probably intentionally. I don't know, but and it's a very straight role, and it was very strange to see him in there. It's just the most peculiar bit of casting, and he's not in there a whole lot, maybe 10 minutes total screen time, but it was. And then he's taking this life extension chemical from the whale, and I thought, okay, I don't think we need more of this life. We don't need this extended. So that was my metaphor. And then this seems to be a theme with his films, just these deus ex machina moments at the end where there's some sort of divine intervention. We've been watching this film thinking that these characters are going to solve their problems sort of on their own. And now some whale comes in and makes defeat of the enemy possible. And it was just, it happens in The Abyss too. We'll get to that later, but...
To be fair, I thought that whale was the best character in the movie.
Yeah. I like nothing against the whale, but again, just how he's used as an actor, I guess. And it's funny because he goes past climax after climax after climax, and as a result, climaxes become anticlimaxes when you've got 10 or 12 of them, and they've all sort of gone to this point, or the kids have been trapped again, and guess what? The kids got trapped again. It's too much. So restraint is my biggest takeaway, is that this film, his other films, don't have any restraint, and I think they could use some, but you're probably right, because there are people who've just lost $1.7 billion to this filmmaker, and people love it, I guess.
Colonialism is one of those kind of themes that seems to keep coming up in the pod, isn't it? It's kind of this post-colonial world. We're still trying to deal with, the wages of colonialism, and part of the cliches in this film, I think, are Cameron trying to deal with a sort of post-colonial mindset. I mean, he comes across as somebody who, has a lot of good intentions, and he wants to make this environmental point.
Yeah.
And, he probably has, genuine deep sympathy with people who have been colonized or people who've been undermined and invaded and overturned. But it feels like he sort of well-meaningly blunders into it.
Yeah.
Without enough self-reflection. A metaphor I was trying to think of, he's like somebody who wants to save the rainforest, and somebody thinks he does it. We'll put on a rock concert to save the rainforest. So to put on the rock concert, they bulldoze 2,000 acres of rainforest and build a stadium.
Exactly.
Trying to make a film where you are being sort of sympathetic to the colonized and trying to talk about the balance of power, but somehow he's ended up with a white savior plot, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, the only person who can save the Na'vi are, this human guy who, he actually knows, all about the planet and how to save them. And in the same way, there's this kind of subplot that Kiri, who's the sort of the virgin birth girl who came out of Sigourney Weaver, she is, half human, half Na'vi, but she is like the only character who can really communicate with the planet.
Yeah.
It feels, it just feels like it's like a constant stream of white people barging in saying, yes, I know what these people need. I'll save you. Again and again.
Mm-hmm.
I did look up the credits for the writing. Interestingly, for a story which is so simple, 5 people are credited with the story.
Yeah.
Which makes you think, did they get like 7 words each? Was it like a game? And like they each managed to contribute like, 1.5 sentences or something. So James Cameron gets the credit. Also for the story credit and the script, it's Rick Jaffa and Amanda Silver. So they wrote Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and they wrote Jurassic World. There's a kind of pattern forming here, isn't it? These
absolutely.
are big movies about enormous events rather than stories about characters. But then, in addition, there are story credits for Shane Salerno, who wrote Armageddon, and Josh Friedman, who wrote Terminator: Dark Fate. So I think 5 people contributing to the story, but they are all people who are familiar with this kind of apocalyptic, massive, world-ending event movies.
Yeah, and that's probably why there's really nothing new in the story or in the script or in the film.
Yep.
And I think I had read that. I think this is the project. I think this is the Cameron project where he had them all. They've sort of planned out all the films in advance, probably 10, 12 years ago. And then I think what happened was a couple of the writers are credited film by film. So they each had sort of one that was their personal baby more so than the others. Then he comes in and writes, cleans them up, or dirties them up. I don't know what he does with his scripts, but oh boy. So they're all sort of invested, but at the same time, they are more invested probably in their own projects than the others. But I think he had to keep their interest by saying, okay, we're going to plan out all these films together. And I think there's a series too, isn't there? I think there's a series on the.
Oh, is that right? Oh my goodness!
I thought so. I thought there's some Adam. Yeah, I mean, if you look at his credits, he's got the 8 or 10 big films, but then he's written for countless video games and series that have gone to televisions based on the film. So. There's just a lot of material out there, and I do agree with you. I think you're kind of getting the same people to rewrite the same stories, and it just shows, obviously very little originality, but it's safe. The stuff is selling, so I guess it's safe, but it's not.
All those movies made money. Yep.
Yeah.
I have one more question to ask, and then maybe we'll phone the cliche squad.
Okay.
But my question to you is, maybe I've seen more James Cameron movies than you have.
Yes.
I did come away asking, where are the jokes in this film? Usually there are a couple of good gags in a James Cameron film. I don't know whether you've seen Terminator 2. There is a gag in that film where John Connor and the Terminator are kind of holed up in this industrial building, and John Connor turns up and he says to the Terminator, "Oh, the police are here," and the Terminator says, "How many?" And John Connor says, "All of them."
Yeah.
And it's it's a lovely gag, and it's such a good gag that I've seen that gag copied many times in many other films. It's a really, really plagiarized gag.
Yeah.
But the only joke I can remember from this movie is towards the end when it's the little girl, Took, I think. She gets tied up once again, and she says almost directly to the audience, "I can't believe I'm tied up again."
Yeah.
Which it did make everybody laugh, but it also did feel a bit on the nose.
Very on the nose, yeah. I don't think I remember anything funny intention. I think on the whale boat there were a couple moments though. The whalers were sort of a comic relief, I think, in a really sadistic way. I think they're
okay.
I mean, they were
pretty bleak comic relief.
Yeah, caricature-ish. I mean, I think like they're sort of uncouth whalers, just out there doing their job. But they're no. And again, there you got Jermaine Clement, who could be the comic relief. He could be a comic character and get a couple laughs in there, and he wasn't used in that way. So I was very confused by that. So yeah, I don't think there were any comic moments, and I'm not sure they would have come off anyway. So, yeah. I'll run one thing by you. There's something very, I don't know, au courant about the film in terms of language. Are the kids in the UK saying bro a lot? Bro, this, bro, that, bro, how are you, bro? That sort of stuff? Bro, basically?
Well, I only talk to 2 kids on a regular basis, and neither of those 2 say bro to me.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Did you notice this in the film, that the younger characters use bro constantly, which is a very American teen thing right now? And they also use bitch quite freely in this film as well.
Blimey. I did not notice that.
And it's I don't know, it's so patronizing, I think. I mean, I don't know when this script was initially written, but somewhere in the last 12 years, obviously this has come into the lingua franca in the U.S. And I hear my stepchildren doing it. I hear the kids in school doing it all the time. So there's a lot of bro, and to try and be up to the times, which is going to make it feel very, very dated very soon. He has the kids using bro constantly. That both the brothers as well as the kids in the other village, and is it the Navi village as well? They're all using bro a lot. So it's just irritating, and I find it like, okay, I'm going to try and be hip and current by having the kids talk in this way that will probably be abandoned within the next couple of years when they start using, I don't know, sis. Hey, sis, I don't know. But that bothered me quite a bit, as many did things did in this film. So, did you want to go to the Cliche Squad, or should we give them a week off?
I think they're all poised outside the door with that big hammer to knock it off its hinges. I think the Cliche Squad are here.
Cliche Squad.
They're banging on our door. Oh, Cliche Squad!
So,
thank you for coming.
Oh my God, we could do a whole pod on the Cliche Squad for this movie, I think. But any favorites?
The one that always irritates me is inaccurate weapons. Despite the amazing technology out there, no one can kill anyone with a bullet or a lightning bolt or anything at all.
Except an arrow, which always kills. Whenever an arrow is fired, it's always a definite kill.
Absolutely deadly, yes. Yeah, so that's probably my top cliche. How about yourself? What comes to mind?
So we've already talked about children characters just being tokens, like to be held hostage and traded. Yeah. A little bit like some kind of trading game, or rather than real characters. It happens so much that the film literally comments on it. Yeah. But beside that, it has to be. It's like the pouting, surly teenager, which fits so many of the kind of the key characters in this film. Mm-hmm. It's like they're all the pouting, surly teenager, and then also the hysterical woman. So Neytiri is, I suppose, she's supposed to be written as the emotional core of the family, but the way that her character comes across is just that she seems impetuous and hysterical when the men are all being kind of serious and stroking their chins and coming up with a plan. And it feels feels like another 1960s kind of character somehow. Yeah. It's like, a woman who's screaming her emotions out loud while the men are trying to, properly load their guns. Yeah.
How about, I was going to say, native medicine is always the best medicine.
Oh, yeah.
They're working on, someone's injured. Is it Loak is injured or something like that? One of the kids is injured. And
it's Kiri, isn't it, I think?
Is it Kiri?
She has a seizure, doesn't she? That's it.
They're trying to revive her, and then all of a sudden, it's Kate Winslet's character, I think. I forget her name. She comes in and she has the native medicines for that part of that village among the water. And that one, just cures Kiri in no time.
I love the way that she has a seizure because it gives Jake an excuse to phone his old buddies up to come over with their kind of human medicine, which means that that can drive the plot forward. It feels like a very sort of a grindy, obvious take a step forward with the plot moment here. And then as soon as those guys turn up with their human medicine, they're there for literally 15 seconds and then they're kind of shoved back out again. And told, oh, no, we have much better medicine than
that whole scene, I think, was in there just to get radar on the boat so that Quaritch and his guys could track them to the village, right? I mean, it was such a contrivance and cliched upon that. I mean, it's just, unbearable.
It could work, but I don't know. It's a shame that it's so transparent. It could have been done a little bit more subtly.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Well, as we were saying, Avatar: Way of Water has made $1.7 billion. We'll probably cross $2 billion in the next 2 weeks. Let's have a break, and we will come back and discuss a completely different film about struggling to survive underneath water. So we'll come back and talk about The Abyss in a minute. So, we here at the Two Real Cinema Club are proud to launch our new YouTube channel, which is called Please Like and Subscribe and Ring the Notification Bell. We hope you'll like and subscribe to Please Like and Subscribe and Ring the Notification Bell. And when you do subscribe, make sure you ring the notification bell so that when we upload any new videos to Please Like and Subscribe and Ring the Notification Bell, you'll be notified immediately so that you can like and subscribe. Please like and subscribe and ring the notification bell. We'll be making high-quality videos about liking, subscribing, and about ringing the notification bell. 3 topics at the very heart of most YouTube content today. How many fingers does the like icon have? Does subscribing without liking break the YouTube algorithm? Exactly how loud is the notification bell? You'll find videos like these and more, all at Please Like and Subscribe and Ring the Notification Bell. And you'll only need to watch 12 ads for Grammarly and 6 pleads to like and subscribe before you can see them. we really hope that you'll like, subscribe, and ring that bell at please like and subscribe and ring the notification bell. And if the channel is as successful as we hope it will be, we'll be launching a new channel in the spring called Without Any Further Ado, Let's Get Into It. So, please like and subscribe and ring the notification bell. And now, without any further ado, let's get into it.
Nice. Thank you for liking, subscribing, and ringing the notification bell. We are back to talk about an earlier James Cameron feature on this deep dive of his films. The Abyss, 1989. It's coming off the success of The Terminator. This is based on a short story that he wrote as early as age 16. That might explain some things. Apparently he went to a lecture about deep-sea diving experiments with a breathing fluid, and that does figure prominently in the film, which was filmed in part at an uncompleted nuclear power station, I guess like a nuclear reactor, in a tank so large it took 4 days to fill. So they were still, I guess, decorating it while it was being filled. But 40% of the principal photography happened underwater. I think there was a lake nearby and then another tank somewhere else. So they were filming in a couple of different locations. There was no end of near drowning anecdotes in the making of the film, and the cast all trained as divers for weeks and weeks and weeks, and they all have these horror stories about like nearly drowning or not being able to breathe properly, and all sorts of stories about how hellish the shoot was. Well, let's just get into it, I guess, huh? Jimmy, do you have anything you want to say before we go? Because this is going to be a ride.
The only thing I will say is, as I was saying before the break, so I read this book, The Futurist.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And the chapter about the making of The Abyss is fascinating, but you do get a very strong impression that James Cameron is someone who has a very strong vision, and he has an enormous amount of energy, but he is not easy to work for or with.
Yeah.
And maybe that kind of shows in the film, or at least this is a film about hardship, and I think some of the hardship is not acting in this film.
The protagonist is Bud Brigman, played by Ed Harris. I think it's kind of his story quite clearly. Ed Harris certainly complained about making the film in some quotes that I read. And Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio plays his wife, Lindsay Brigman. She doesn't like to be called Mrs. Brigman. I loved Chris Elliott as Bendix. It's a small role, but just to see, again, both of these films have comic actors just miscast. Chris Elliott has a small role as a Navy, radar reader or something like that. So it starts out, there's a nuclear submarine, the USS Montana. And I got to say that Montana is a landlocked mountainous state. That's its name, implies that Montana mountain. But it goes down when it encounters some sort of mysterious disturbance, but they can rule out it's not a Soviet craft. The sub does, the Montana, I believe, has a nuclear warhead on it. So the Navy sends some big guys and a team of Navy SEALs in to investigate. They want to figure out what happened to this sub and probably get the warhead out of there. But they will commandeer Bud Brigman's. He has this underwater oil drilling operation called Deep Core, I think. Yeah, the Deep Core crew.
Core, yeah.
Yeah, so it's this sort of submersible oil rig that his wife, oddly enough, or just a coincidence, Lindsay has designed this. So she's going to be on the brig as well, and that puts husband and sort of estranged wife together in uncomfortably close quarters. He's the toughest nails, on and off again husband. He's messy. In fact, he says as much. He says, "Hey guys, clean this place up. It's beginning to look like my apartment." And then Lindsay, his wife, is the organized and ambitious one, and she says, "I put 4 years of my life into this rig." So she designed it, and it's just this expository dialogue that we get from James Cameron films, apparently. Not very subtle. The head Navy SEAL, I got to talk about Coffee because he has the biggest mustache. And Jimmy, you and I know we're veterans of analysis and characterization. I think the intended characterization here is that this is the guy with the biggest mustache. And as such, he's the kind of guy that would intentionally grow the biggest mustache, and he will need to be brought down eventually. So he's the bad guy, I think, kind of the key antagonist in this cramped space. So the Navy SEALs are along for the ride with these sort of, I guess they're like oil drillers. There's a word for that, which will come back to me later on. Anyway, this is a deep sea oil drilling, and they're just the submarine sort of conveniently goes down very close to where their operation is. So they are sort of enlisted to help the Navy to get the dead passengers out of this sunken sub. Talking a little bit more about characterization, there's another crew member named Hippie, and he apparently eats chocolate bars all the time. And he has a pet rat that he kisses. So this is Cameron-type visual characterization. It's interesting because the rat this is an uncomfortable scene. The rat is taken from Hippie at one point, and this Navy SEAL sort of doctor type, he sort of demonstrates this fluid that allows you to breathe in water by drowning the rat. It's a harrowing kind of scene. But eventually the rat stops sort of struggling because the fluid's been added to the water where he's trying to drown the rat, and the rat can breathe. It's amazing. And it sort of foreshadows what we might see later on. The two teams together, the oil riggers and the Navy SEALs sort of go to investigate the sub, but it becomes pretty clear that the SEALs are really not that interested in recovering bodies. It's kind of a harrowing scene again where you see all these sort of dead bodies floating around. But the Navy SEALs aren't particularly interested in helping them or saving them. They are really there for this warhead that's in the Montana. The stakes are inelegantly raised because there just happens to be a major hurricane approaching the site. The Cubans and the Soviets are rattling sabers with the Americans in a new missile crisis. And the guy now in charge, that's Coffee, remember the big mustache, he's in charge of the warhead, and he's obviously the least shaven and the most mustachioed, but he's also going crazy due to the effects of deep sea diving, which they've sort of illustrated very bluntly and directly, that he's starting to shake his hands, and there are a lot of scenes where you just see him looking at his hand and it's shaking. And then also the stakes are high because, I don't know if I mentioned it, this happens very deep in the ocean in the Caribbean. So it's just sort of this perfect storm of all sorts of the worst things possible happening in one moment. This hurricane comes, it sort of rips the cranes off this support ship above the deep core. It damages the deep core rig, sort of drags it down towards this abyss. And, the nuclear warhead is now on board because the Navy SEALs sort of dragged it into the deep core, almost like a corpse in a body bag. So they did recover it. So the thing that's not that prominent in this film that I thought would be more prominent is this alien presence down at the bottom of the ocean there. It comes in the form of lights and these sort of jellyfish that start to appear for Lindsay at first, and then the deep core crew starts to see it. They're visited by this alien at one point in this sort of serpent stream of water that plays a sort of like a game of mirror with Lindsay reflecting her face.
Yeah.
It's kind of an interesting scene, but she does something that we saw Dr. Gower do recently in It's a Wonderful Life. She decides to sort of dip her finger into it and then taste the water, and that's how she confirms that it was seawater. So this creature at one point, these aliens at one point are like jellyfish or just light, and then at another point they're sort of this stream of seawater that can come in and mirror them. So again, it's like James Cameron does this thing where he sort of gives himself perhaps too many options in terms of how to bring characters to life. I mean, what are they really? Because we're going to see a different version of the aliens later on. Coffee, he still has the biggest mustache. He traps the deep core. He traps them in this compartment down in what's left of their rig. He wants to go off and do something with the warhead. He's gonna drop it into the abyss, I believe. Jimmy, is that what he was doing? What was he doing with the warhead?
I think so. My understanding was he was worried that the Soviets were going to get their hands on a US nuclear submarine. So his orders were to prevent it falling into the hands of the Soviet Union, blow it up.
Okay. That kind of makes sense now. Yeah. Bud and Lindsay, who have been sort of on again, off again, they're very contentious as a couple, but there's obviously a lot of love there. But they get into a submersible, and I wouldn't recommend this if you're in a submersible. They start using it kind of as a weapon. I don't know. We have the bumper cars at the the carnivals and the fairs where you can just intentionally smash into another vehicle. That's what they start doing, and it proves that only the power of love can annihilate the biggest mustaches. That was the message I got. Lindsay nearly dies because she hasn't drunk that magic fluid to breathe air and water. So Bud has to get her back to what's left of sort of the deep core station, and but with love and persistence and light CPR of her non-loving, unestranged husband, Bud, she comes back to life. And I was taught, Jimmy, you're a medical guy, I was taught that you basically have to break ribs to do CPR correctly. Is that correct?
You do, yeah. But apparently the Actors Union objects to that.
Okay, there you go. So
you have to bend your elbows when you're on a film set.
He's a little light on the CPR, and I think it's more his love. That's what it is. It's the salve of love that really cures her. Bud ultimately has to go on this ridiculous dive down, I think at one point 17,000 feet or something like that. So he's miles and miles or kilometers and kilometers down there. He has to deactivate the lost warhead, but he's saved by the jellyfish, which now look kind of like E.T., a pink E.T. driving a jellyfish. It looks like he has control of the jellyfish. He's this very embryonic-looking alien. And I'm just going to say this, Deus ex machina numero 2, because we saw it in the first film. The aliens are managed to float the entire deep core and all aboard it to the surface, and then that sort of captures or also lifts all the ships that are hovering around on the surface. I think there's kind of this can of worms because the alien civilization surfaces at the end, but Cameron cuts to Bud and Lindsay, who are reunited and kissing, and Lindsay finally, she's okay with being called Mrs. Brigman at the end. So that's what I saw. Maybe you saw something differently. And I have to say that this was what did we decide? Like the 2 hour it was 2 hours and 20 minutes, I think.
Yeah, so there's two versions of this film, isn't it? It's like 2 hours 10 and a 2 hour 50 version.
So
I did look up, so I also saw the 2 hour 10 minute version. Okay. I did look up the extended version.
Yeah.
And that it contains more sort of character detail for the crew of the Deep Core, and there's a much longer third act where the actions of the aliens are more motivated, more explored.
Okay,
so I think that's kind of largely what is missing from the shorter version.
Okay,
I don't think the film is too short at 2 hours 10.
No,
I have a bit of a confession, which is that I really like The Abyss from 1989.
Yeah.
I think the third act, I will admit, has problems, and it is kind of a bit sentimental, and it is a bit mawkish, and it is kind of also a little bit sort of truncated, and it seems it's difficult to really understand why the aliens do what they do when we're given so little information about what they're making their judgments on in the short version of the movie. But I think Bud and Lindsay in this film are great actors. Ed Harrison, Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, two terrific actors doing great performances for the material they've been given.
Yeah.
I think they are a great screen couple. They are a great team, and to me, they feel really quite authentic. They bicker and they argue, but also they appreciate each other's strengths. They work together like real adults. I think it's a great performance. I find the scene, even now, even though I know what is coming, because this is my second or third time I think I've seen the film, I still find it quite moving. That scene where Lindsay has to drown and Bud has to drag her through the freezing water and then try and resuscitate her, and it looks like it's not going to pan out, and then in the end it does. I think it's it's a good scene, well made and quite moving. I think there's a lot to enjoy in this film.
It's nice that he doesn't just leave her to die. I got to say that as a husband. I mean, he works on her. He definitely, the whole crew gives up. He keeps going. But it does. It's a little cliched. It's almost like the kiss is the final thing that does it, and she revives. Yeah, I'm not going to say that I loved it, and I can't go back and watch the longer version. I finally got it on DVD here, and I'll look at bonus features, but I can't look at it. But what I do understand is that in the longer version, I believe the aliens show him a number of videos. He shows they're able to show him how, I guess, barbaric Earthlings are, and
Yeah.
how the war is so awful and such. So that would give me a lot more context for it. I just felt like the aliens were totally underutilized. As a result, as you said, it becomes kind of confusing what their motivations are. Why would they save this guy and all the military boats that are up above if they, or if they feel threatened by him, or if these guys are destroying the ocean, if they're going to, create oil spills and leave their nuclear subs down there. So it's problematic. And I thought this film was much more about their occupation down there. And then, you sort of get a sense of it. He shows you this big, is it a spaceship that can move? Is it a civilization and a culture or a city or what? It just leaves a lot of unanswered questions, and it happens at the very end. I mean, most of the alien stuff is in the last 10 minutes or something like that.
10 minutes, yeah, absolutely.
So it just feels like he, I don't want to encourage him to make longer films, but it seems like he had a bigger story to tell here. He didn't tell what story he had terribly efficiently, so we're left with all these questions about what could have been a kind of cool film with these other creatures down below.
I'll tell you what I think James Cameron is really good at. And I think maybe he's slightly lost some of this skill in Avatar: Way of Water, but in his earlier work. So he started out with The Terminator. I mean, he started out with Piranha II, but I don't think anyone's... I don't think he feels that film really belongs to him. Started out with The Terminator. He made Aliens. At the same time that he was writing the script, I think, for The Terminator, he was also writing the script for Rambo: First Blood Part 2.
Yeah.
And he wrote Stranger Days, a Ralph Fiennes film. I don't know whether you've seen that. I saw that once many years ago. The thing that he is really, really good at is setting up and paying off. Rambo, it's a pretty racist, vile, violent, unpleasant, nasty, cliched film, but it's tremendously efficiently written. Every single thing appears on screen for a reason. Nothing is wasted. Everything comes back. Everything is reincorporated. And it feels much the same in this film, that I feel it's pacey and tremendously efficient. So when you talk about Hippie, who's the character who has the chocolate and the rat, we see one scene maybe where he has this pet rat, and then that rat is used for 2 further plot points later on. It's really efficiently reincorporated. He puts the rat in a bag, and then he makes a bit of a mistake of trying to rescue the rat, and and putting himself in danger when the deep core floods. And then later on, the rat is used to demonstrate this breathing fluid, which will then be reincorporated later on in the movie. Yeah. So everything is there for a reason. Nothing is wasted.
Yeah, for some ridiculous reasons. I think you could also look at those as being just amazing contrivances that he puts to use for himself. I mean, he definitely, he puts things in there, but it feels very unnatural most of the time to me. I think he's great at shooting in small, moving spaces. I think that's the incredible stuff here. The submarine stuff is harrowing. A lot of the stuff in Deep Core, where he's sort of just buzzing through tunnels with a camera, and characters are going both directions. He's fantastic with that. He's very good on visuals. And I feel I have some empathy for him. I feel a little bit sorry for him because sort of the reward for originating all this cutting edge technology is people laughing at how it looks 33 years later, I mean, he's really furthered filmmaking in terms of underwater stuff, in particular with Titanic and in Way of Water, and these actors who are going through these intense breathing practices in order to be able to breathe underwater. And Deep Core has great technology until it has paper maps and charts for the ocean floor and VCR tapes and chunky television. So, so it's very interesting that he, I think a lot of people would not watch a film like this because just in terms of the technology, it seems very dated already. But at the time, it was super advanced, and he's the guy who almost single-handedly gets it going in that direction. Same thing for Avatar. So you sort of he gets laughs, I think, in the sense that it's not techie enough now, but it was fantastic back then. So I think he's a fault of his, I will say, is that I think he puts that technology in front of the story. And it takes a backseat to good story writing and acting. I don't think he's a very good writer at all, and I think that comes off in sort of the blunt nature of the setups that you're talking about, and also just that the dialogue is so bad, and his direction of actors, I think, is generally so bad. It's very on the nose or very cliched throughout. So I think in terms of shooting stuff, as like a DP or as someone who really knows how to use visual effects and use camera movement and stuff, he's great. But in terms of like being a really nuanced director or writer, I just don't think he has that. I think he could probably map out a story, but I don't think he should be writing scripts.
I mean, you are right that there is quite a bit of exposition, but I think the film is pacey, and that's part of the price maybe you pay for moving the story on. I tell you, from my previous viewings of this film, the scene that I most vividly remember is the scene of the drowning and the CPR. But watching it this time round, I think the finest scene in this film, I think it's a real show of filmmaking skill, is all the characters watching a coil appear on the seafloor out of a window. So the moment in the story is when the crane that brings the deep core drilling rig up and down to the surface has been knocked over by the storm, and so the crane just falls into the water, and you know that the crane is directly above the drilling rig, so it's going to hit the rig, but the thing that precedes the crane is the cable, and you have all the characters just watching this cable appear and loop around like a snake or a worm on the seafloor, and just this simple visual image is really milked for all the suspense you can get out of it. I think it's really sort of skillful, a little bit of visual storytelling. Yeah. Brilliantly paced scene because, spoilers, the crane doesn't land on the rig. Yeah. And so everyone breathes a sigh of relief. And then the crane very, very slowly tips over the edge of this undersea cliff and then starts to descend down into the abyss. And now where previously that cable was like a herald of doom, now instead it's going to be the cause of doom, because the cable is still attached to the crane and it's going to pull the whole rig down into the abyss. It's just it's taking one simple sort of engineering physical fact and milking it for a great little bit of story. I think that's just terrific. I would give you that. That is a good scene and it is well done. It's subtle, which much of the film is not. Here, I'm gonna talk to you about one sequence, one setup and payoff that I thought was more typical of his style. I think Bud Brigman, I guess he works on the brig, right? He's a brigman. Bud Brigman, subtle. He and his wife Lindsay are, of course, having troubles, or I don't know if they're estranged, they're separated, or whatnot. So at one point, he throws his wedding ring into a toilet. Yep. And then he goes back and fishes it out, and as a result, his hand is blue. His ring finger, well, it's a whole, I guess his left hand, I think it was. I'm not sure where he wore the ring. It's blue for the rest of the film. The rest of the film, yeah. Okay, so the payoff comes much later when he fishes it out of the toilet, puts the ring back on his finger, and then he's struggling to keep one of these automatic doors, these vault doors, from shutting. And he's able to do it. And you learn afterwards that one of the reasons he was able to do it is because the ring is actually instrumental in holding the weight of the door on and not crushing his finger. Yeah. I mean, it's fairly elementary symbolism, but I think it's an exciting moment. I think it's fine. Oh, I have so much lower standards than you, don't I? So that. We were talking about comic moments in Avatar. For me, that's a comic moment because it's just, and maybe I don't know that he wants it to be comic, but I'm laughing at that because I think it's a very, very blunt bit of I don't know, visual storytelling right there. It's just a little too blunt for me. I tell you what, I think this film is enough to put you off a life underwater. Yeah. Oh. The sheer violence of the flooding scenes when the deep core gets breached and chamber after chamber fills up with water. It's really terrifying. I mean, that is proper horror.
Yeah, I hate.
Yeah, it does give you a real sensation of the claustrophobia and the fear, and the sensation of how close you are to death.
Yeah, yeah, and I was almost wishing to be a bit more claustrophobic at times. It was because the deep core, they seem to have a number of different spaces. It's a little hard to get the architecture without a complete establishment early on, but yeah, that's frightening to me. And any one of those scenes where they're running out of an air pocket, the water's getting higher and higher, and people are pressing their heads to the ceiling to try and grasp that last little bit of oxygen. I hate stuff like that. So those are tense moments. And yes, I would never get on a submarine. I would never go down in a submersible or anything like that. And I think he does communicate that fear very well. So again, that's that movement in tight spaces. It's incredible. He's very good at that.
I think it's a lovely scene when Bud and Lindsay are in that submarine because it fills up with water so fast. Somehow I remember watching it this time around and being really surprised how quickly it fills up. Yeah. I was thinking there should be another couple of minutes in this scene, but no, it moves, cracks ahead at a really good pace.
Yeah,
there's no waiting around. I was never bored at any point during The Abyss.
Yeah,
and I tell you one other thing. Earlier on, we were talking about how for me, The Way of Water, the new Avatar film, is uncomfortably bright.
Yeah,
everything is so brightly and I think so evenly lit. People have commented on how incredibly realistic it looks, but to me, I think it looks excessively evenly lit. So I find it difficult to imagine that it's really real.
Yeah.
Whereas The Abyss properly enjoys the darkness that it's set in. The screen is very dark for most of the time in the film.
Yep.
It uses that kind of noir technique of, if you don't like the set, then you don't need to build the set. So I think, they're keeping it, simple by just minimizing the lighting.
Yeah. It is. It's good. It's wise too, because I think if you light it more, if you light it brighter, you're going to see a lot of the stuff in the background. That remember they're in a nuclear reactor. They're in a small, probably a fairly small lake or tank. So you've got to go dark. I think otherwise it's not going to be believable. And as a result, you end up with this really believable look. I agree with you. Yeah. With the scene where Bud and Lindsay are in that capsule and it's filling up with water, didn't you want to yell at the screen and say, "Stop talking! You're wasting oxygen." One of you puts on the mask, the other one climbs on back and holds the breath, and you get back to the deep core. It was frustrating. It was
a bit confusing how he waited for her to drown and die before taking her body out. Why not just get a head start? Maybe just go now.
Considering that they're sort of on the verge of reuniting, really. I mean, they've just killed the guy with the mustache, and they're basically ready to be falling back in love again, and instead they're yelling at each other in the therapy session when the thing is the compartment's filling up with water and they're suffocating.
Okay, well we've got one new feature, and then we're going to go to a synthesis, which is bringing the two films together. But before that new feature, we're going to play a game. The game is called Who Am I?
Ooh.
Who am I?
So, my theory, I'm not the only person with this theory, my theory is that we go to the cinema because we want to see ourselves on the screen, but ourselves, but different. Ourselves in a different world, or ourselves not necessarily made perfect, but made different. In either of the two films that we watched this week, could you see yourself? If you had to see yourself, who are you going to be?
In either film?
Yeah, in either film. And this is not fair because I've already prepared an answer, so I know what I'm going to say. So
I knew this was coming. No,
so I'm already putting you on the spot.
All right. I can't pronounce his name. I would be the older brother. Is it Neteyam?
Oh,
I think I would.
What, like the good brother?
The good brother, and in part because I do like to follow the rules and obey my parents and such. So I like to consider myself a bit more even-keeled and calm. So I would be him, but also...
You expect us to believe any of that?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's the truth. But more so, that's not the reason I would want to be him. I would want to be him because he gets killed before the film is over. And I wanted to be killed before the film was over too. But furthermore... do you guys have human composting in the UK now?
Oh my God. I'm sure it probably exists, but I'm not sure that I was aware of it before about 10 seconds ago.
So I've decided I'd like to be human composted, I guess. Yeah, it's actually, it uses much less energy than cremation. And There's this wonderful scene. I like when they finally say goodbye to him, he sort of just disappears into these little tentacles of coral or something like that at the bottom of the ocean. It just looks like he's going to be taken back by these stalagmites that are just waving around, and he's just going to be reincorporated into the ocean, which, I understand that he's a forest person, and that's kind of a little inappropriate for him. But I just love the fact that he was just going to be absorbed into nature and moved on into the universe. So I loved that. So I think, in part because he dies. That's the one. He dies and he has a brilliant composting bit. So I'm going to say Netiam.
For my pick is entirely different. I think if I see myself anywhere on screen, I think I am Colonel Quaritch.
Oh.
Like the bad guy in Avatar Way of Water.
Wow.
Only because there are at least 2, maybe 3 scenes where whatever is happening on screen, he is drinking a cup of tea.
Yeah. Oh.
And I can strongly empathise with the need to have a nice warm cup of tea, just available at any point.
Oh, that's great.
Maybe you're trying to bomb some locals or search for a renegade, but always have a cup of tea on hand. That's my motto.
It's also a very funny bit of characterization because he's a hoorah Marine, right? Tough guy and hard scrabble kind of character and drinking tea. Yeah,
always time for a cup of tea.
It's interesting. There's on in the Abyss. There's this one Navy officer who's just eating a sandwich, and I always wonder, well, what are you trying to tell me with that characterization? He's the guy who eats sandwiches. At tense moments, he always has a sandwich.
Character revealed through action.
Yeah.
It's screenwriting 101. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Well, let's try and bring the films together. So I'm tempted to do a bit of a synthesis. I think, having watched these 2 films, I don't think anyone will be surprised to watch these 2 films and then be told, they're made by the same guy.
Not at all. Yeah.
Clearly, James Cameron's he's the same filmmaker, interested in the same things. So, he is interested in family, certainly interested in spectacle. I've written interested in motivated action. So, things happen and they happen for a reason. It's my kind of point earlier about, reincorporation. Things are set up and they are paid off. Things happen for a reason. He's interested in, man versus nature. Mm-hmm. He's interested in water. He's really interested in water.
Really interested in water.
I mean, you would watch these 2 films and then you'd have to ask yourself, who else could possibly have made Titanic?
Yeah.
But I think the Abyss demonstrates his skill at kind of reincorporation. So, I think most of the elements there are present for a reason. When Catfish, he's like the big burly core member. He kind of earlier on in the movie, he's boasting about you see this fist. They used to call this the hammer, and then later on the hammer comes back and it punches coffee out. So everything, even those little feed lines, they're all there for a reason. In Avatar, it's the reincorporation isn't quite as clear because I think some of the elements that are going to be reincorporated are going to get reincorporated in another film. Yeah. He's sowing seeds for the next films and not paying it all off in this film. So that makes The Way of Water feel kind of more sloppy and loose. And I think the other thing that James Cameron has kind of forgotten since 1989 is how to turn off the lights. I think that all the darkness in The Abyss makes it cinematographically, and thematically a better film, I think. I think there's more darkness on screen and in the characterization. I think both of the films are unsubtle. You're right, and they are both kind of moralizing. But I think the characters in The Abyss, well, I know that you feel they're on the nose. I think they're better written than the characters in Avatar.
Oh, much better.
I think they are more moving, more human, more understandable. And also, kind of watching The Abyss, I didn't feel that the outcome of the movie was nearly as inevitable. Certainly watching it first time round, I don't think I guessed that aliens saved the day in the final 10 minutes. Yeah. Whereas I do feel a little bit like, just from looking at the poster, I could have taken a reasonable guess at the story for The Way of Water, and it turned out to be right.
Yeah.
But I don't know, do you feel the 2 films, do you think Cameron has learned more or forgotten more in the 33 years between these movies?
He's definitely forgotten something. I'm really happy that you've focused on the visual filmmaking and the lighting, because you're right. with the screen being so dark in the abyss, that means that the characters get properly lit, and it really means it brings a light to everything that's really important in the frame. Whereas I saw the Avatar film, Way of Water, on a fairly big screen, so you're looking all over the screen because there is just crap happening everywhere, and it makes it hard to focus. And that film loses focus a lot more often than The Abyss does. The Abyss is actually quite disciplined in terms of the storytelling. There's not a ton of storytelling, and I think he introduces a couple extraneous things with the next missile crisis going on and the storm coming on. I think he's got a lot of things that are sort of detract from the story. So he does make detours, but it's compared to Way of Water, it's way more disciplined. For me, I think both of them are just, again, I can't get around this intentional epic nature of the films. He's trying to make something huge, and as a result, you're never going to pull it off, I don't think, if you try and make something that's just absolutely great and huge and long and meaningful. He's setting the goal, I think, a little high for himself. But the themes that I see a lot are sort of either military or maybe even less, or I guess more generally, men causing problems, humans causing problems, and not being able to solve them ultimately. The fact that aliens come in, or a whale that has this greater intelligence than humans come in, at the climaxes of both films really tells me that we're causing a lot of problems that we can't fix. And I think that's the big theme in both films. It sort of carries through, and that we need help, as opposed to, and we do, I understand that. But again, it's sort of extraterrestrial help. It's extra human help that's needed. It's not, these are not problems that even though we've caused, we can't address them ourselves. And that's ultimately kind of pessimistic, I think. So I think those are the connections that I see more than anything else. And I think he's learned a lot. Again, technologically, he's really pushed the envelope, and he's done some great things that I think are probably going to be utilized by filmmakers to come, and the future of filmmaking in general. But I think maybe he's lost a little bit of his sense of story. I think, you were talking about the Rambo script as being bad, or Terminator. I think now he's all about the visuals. That's far more important. So it's like, tech first, visual effects first, and story and characters come later, and I think that's a mistake.
Yep, which we obviously agree is the wrong way round. Yep. I'll tell you one other thing that has changed since 1989. The Abyss, I think, did not make money.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
So it was kind of a flop, actually. Yeah, it performed, really quite poorly. And Avatar: Way of Water, $1.7 billion.
Yeah.
Did I mention that?
Yeah. Which is a shame, because I think The Abyss is the better film.
I think it is the better film.
By far, yeah.
Well, we've got just time for also playing at this theatre. So, seen anything else over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah.
What else have you seen?
Absolutely. Well, you had a great piece on the popcorn counter about life happening when you're on holiday. And life happened. I saw a lot of stuff. In fact, I saw the first part of one Rian Johnson film, and then the second part of another Rian Johnson film. And it didn't make one film by Rian Johnson in the end. So we saw the first part of Brick.
Oh, wow. Great. I love Brick.
Yeah, I didn't get through we watched the first half, stopped watching it. It was a little incomprehensible. The dialogue was inaccessible in some ways. And then it was one of these things where, you pay $3, you're watching it on I think it was on Amazon Prime. And then we never went back to it, and I thought, do we want to pay $3 again? It really comes down to that level of decision making. And then with some friends, I walked in halfway through the Glass Onion film, which is the new one on Netflix, I believe.
Okay.
And watched that. So I saw pieces of Rian Johnson films. Wasn't particularly happy with either one. I saw Jermaine Clement in Taika Waititi's 2014 What We Do in the Shadows. It's this sort of vampire mockumentary, which I thought was brilliant. I love that. So that was great, and that's probably the reason why we didn't go back to the other films. We just started watching Pam and Tommy, which is a limited series over here. It's on Hulu, I think. It's about their infamous sex tape, Tommy Lee and Pamela Lee Anderson, from a guy named Robert Siegel, who's a really good writer, and he's the creator of some good programs. And then yesterday it was a documentary. It's called All the Beauty and the Bloodshed. I don't know if this is in the UK or not. It's about a photographer named Nan Goldin, who made quite a name for herself in photography between the late 70s, and she's still working. But also about her campaign against the Sackler family, who owned basically outright Purdue Pharma, I guess, and they created OxyContin, which has caused so many deaths and so much destruction here in the United States and abroad. And she's basically getting their names off of places like the Portrait Gallery, the National Gallery and the Portrait Gallery in London. I think the Tate has since taken their name down. So they basically art wash all their money by having funded Guggenheim buildings and wings, and as well as the Metropolitan Museum in New York City. So very good documentary because it talks about her political activism as well as her photography. So it's sort of like a documentary about her life, but really focuses on her excellent efforts to bring the Sackler family down.
Art washing. I'd never heard that before.
Well, I don't know. That's what I called it. I don't know if that's what it is or not, but yeah.
Oh man, it's got to be called that. It should be called that. That's good.
Yeah. How about yourself? What have you seen?
Nothing nearly as highbrow, but we did watch Strange World, which is the new Disney animation film. It got a very brief theatrical release in the UK, I think, and around the world. Disney largely sent it out to die, I think, and then it came onto streaming very quickly after like 4 weeks, something like that. So written by Guy Nguyen, who wrote Raya and the Last Dragon, which is another fairly disappointing Disney animation. Directed by Don Hall, who made Moana and Big Hero 6, which are two outstandingly good recent Disney animation films. Strange World, another bit of a dud, unfortunately.
Oh, no.
Which is a shame.
It looked cool, and it was just recommended to me.
Oh, was it? So
maybe just on a visual level. I mean, I loved we were talking about like Avatar with all these creatures that didn't make any sense, but Strange World to me looked like intentionally surreal. I mean, it looked kind of cool.
I mean, it is surreal, and it's kind of a mixture of, it's a little bit of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea or Journey to the Center of the Earth, and it's a little bit of Fantastic Voyage, and it kind of takes all these different influences and mixes them together. The problem I have with it is that the script is extremely workmanlike. Yeah. And it feels like it's full of far too many scenes of characters telling each other what's happening on screen or explaining the story to each other.
Okay.
What we would call the proper aim for a screenwriter, which is to tell a story through looks and glances, is not the rule in Strange World, I'm afraid. Everything is spoken baldly out loud using dialogue, when it could have been done so much better with looks and glances. And I've written about this on the blog before, that computer animation now is so capable and so subtle that you should be able to tell a sophisticated story without resorting to words at all. Yeah. But I wonder whether people simply lack the confidence for it. So looks great, bit of a miss in our house, unfortunately.
Bummer. Well, maybe I'll take it off my list.
Yeah, cross it off your list. Watch the rest of Brick instead. That's what I would say.
I might have to go back to that. Yeah, I think I will. Glass Onion. It didn't hit for me. Sorry.
Okay.
Maybe if I'd seen the first half, but the second half did. You'd think that's where you're going to see all the good stuff in the conclusion and the climax. It's just an excuse to break a lot of glass sculptures, as far as I could tell. So.
Okay, I didn't particularly enjoy Knives Out either, so it doesn't sound like it's going to go high on my list. Okay. No. So this has been the Two Real Cinema Club. We're emerging back up from Journey Deep to the Bottom of the Sea. We will be back next week with a bit of a chat at the Popcorn Counter. So we'll see you then. Yeah. Thanks for joining us. Thanks. We'll see you next time.
Thanks. Get a breath of fresh air. Fine.
Just breathe.
And we'll be back there.